This video is brought to you by Paragon, my own original sci-fi novel, now available on Amazon. Check the description for links where you can buy. Babylon 5 was a seminal work of science fiction television, but it seems its attempt at a spin-off kept running afoul. I already covered the prematurely cancelled Crusade, but there was another backdoor pilot which failed to get off the ground. Babylon 5 Legend of the Rangers. Set 3 years after Babylon 5 ended, Legend of the Rangers follows a diverse crew in the Ranger Corps who come up against a new alien threat to the galaxy. While it stands as a made-for-TV movie, it was clearly meant to kick off another spin-off show, which never came to be. Presentation-wise, it's pretty much the standard of the previous Babylon 5 seasons, with the now dated VFX, efficient direction, solid sound design, and unlike Crusade, Christopher Franke returned to compose the score. It is kind of weird though to see a Star Trek-esque bridge in a Babylon 5 setting, and many of the sets are clearly thrown together from spare parts that were likely in storage somewhere. That being said, Legend of the Rangers has a lot of visual spectacle and plenty of cool new ship designs to nerd out over. Minbar's large crystal towers have been replaced with immense domes, spires, and lights, and despite the dated VFX, it looks great. The space-based scenes also feature more variety and colour, and generally there's more depth to many of the images. The Leandra is a nice wee hero ship, quite different from the typical Minbari design, and with a fascinating history which was no doubt meant to be explored further in subsequent episodes. I do miss the White Stars though. Character-wise, it's not a bad ensemble, but few were really given a chance to shine outside of a few showcases of their personalities. David Martell is a very typical hero, without the quirkiness of Sheridan or the forthright fortitude of Sinclair. He's the typical chisel-jawed, wisecracking guy, but Dylan Neal actually has the charisma to make it work. It's stereotypical, but it's done well. While the other characters in the crew certainly have screen presence, they don't really get much to do outside of simply serving the plot. But the only real standout was Alex Zahara as Dulan. I get the feeling JMS was going for a Kirk, Spock, McCoy thing with the characters of Martell, Dulan, and Cantrell, but for me only Martell and Dulan's chemistry really made an impact. Outside of the central cast though, Andreas Katsulas was on fine form as always as G'Kar in what would be his final performance as the character. It's been a while since I last rewatched Babylon 5, and it's easy to forget just how fun G'Kar became as a character. Someone deeply spiritual and wise, but also totally kooky and weird. Katsulas lends a really fun energy to the role and steals every scene he's in. As a story, this pilot was a decent, if simple, space adventure. While Babylon 5 was an epic television novel, Legend of the Rangers seemed to be going for an outer space action-adventure show with a fast pace and larger-than-life characters. The setup of a team of diverse characters crewing a rust bucket ship is nothing new, but the filmmakers are talented enough to make it watchable. That is, until we get to any space battle scenes and one of the most baffling additions to Babylon 5 lore is introduced, the holographic space kung fu weapon system. If you're attempting to figure out what the hell you're looking at right now, instead of a normal weapons control on a console, the Leandra instead fires its weapons by having the tactical officer float in a 3D holographic battlefield and fire each weapon with punches and kicks. I don't even know where to begin with this. The concept sounds dumb anyway, and in execution it's just... I don't even know what I'm looking at here. Why on earth would any ship have this? Did they think this looked really cool back in the day? I mean, it's an interesting visual. I certainly commend experimentation, but this is really trying to reinvent the wheel here. Space battles did not need extra Panzerkunst, they were just fine without it. What should be the thrilling action set pieces of this episode are instead drowned out by laughter from the audience. Hats off to Miriam Sorius though, she certainly tried her damnedest to sell it, but oh man was this such a bad idea. When the setup for what was likely going to be another JMS epic 5-year story arc finally reveals itself, it's a bit underwhelming in all honesty. Legend of the Rangers once again suffers from post-Shadow War syndrome. The Shadow War was such a massively crafted and high-stakes plot that anything after it has very little chance of topping it. Luckily, Babylon 5 had the deeply personal and impactful President Clark storyline to wrap up afterwards, but the spin-offs weren't so lucky. While Crusade's premise had potential, Rangers falls a bit flat. The Hand, we're told at least, are even more ancient and even more powerful and even more evil than the Shadows. We're told this, but we're not really shown this. The Shadows in Babylon 5 were built up over time. The first hint of them came in the form of the excellent Mr. Morden. They were only spoken about in hushed whispers, their presence disturbed your very being, and that was when they weren't even seen. Their ships were like something right out of Lovecraftian horror, and when they appeared they laid waste to everything in their path. By the time the Shadows came out in full force, it was nail-biting stuff. Their sheer power and the sense of eldritch terror which surrounded them was overwhelming. Legend of the Rangers tries to establish the Hand as something even worse, but in a fraction of the time, and we as an audience just don't really buy it. And the setup is pretty similar to Third Space as well, although even Third Space managed to build up a sense of dread. The enemy ships in Rangers are an interesting design, and Christopher Franke's music gives them a nice little creepy motif, but all the work to build up the Hand as the even more ultimate bad guys just doesn't really work and feels quite redundant. It's the same bag of Babylon 5 tricks we've already seen. The second half of the film in general drags a bit more than the first. The quick pace and light-hearted adventure feel slowly erodes, and instead we spend a lot of time on plot threads which were once again no doubt meant to be further explored later down the line. While Legend of the Rangers is sold as a TV movie, it's really unfinished as a product, with many dangling threads by the end. The resolution is also quite weak. They do make a point about pulling the same trick twice, but lamp shading it doesn't really improve it. This finale could have been a lot stronger. That being said, my fanboy brain did light up when the film ends on Babylon 5 itself, and Jakar's final scene is a great send-off for the character. So, Babylon 5 Legend of the Rangers, did it suck? You know what, I'm gonna say no with this one. Much like Crusade, we didn't get to see the whole picture, and had this gone to series, we would have had a lot more story and character arcs to talk about. But here we only get the barest of teasers. If we were to judge Babylon 5 only by its first episode, I doubt it would be as celebrated as it is. But as a curiosity for fans of the universe, it's harmless. The characters are fun and the adventure is quite entertaining despite the baffling space kung fu weapon idea. If you've just finished the show and want a bit more Babylon 5 content, Legend of the Rangers is a nice novelty. It may or may not have become something great in the long run, but as it is, I can't really hate it. Pudlord Tynan asks, was there any cool thing you cooked up when writing Paragon you didn't implement for X and Y reasons? So, I originally came up with Paragon as a sci-fi version of the Trojan War story. Troy was a planet instead of a city, Greece was a solar system, etc, etc. But as I tried to keep the character dynamics intact, I had to invent a lot of weird crap to have a space-faring society which still fought in close combat. And before I came up with the idea of Paragons themselves, I had these Green Lantern-esque weapons. I can't really remember what I called them, but they were these gauntlets which could shoot energy blasts but also reform that same energy to make close combat weapons like swords and things. I still think it's kind of a cool idea, but as Paragon developed, the universe just ended up going in a different direction, and I just decided to have the characters use plasma swords instead, which is a cool weapon in and of itself. But who knows, maybe I'll bring those weapons back for a sequel or a different novel or something. If you like my videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on all my new uploads. You can see videos early on my Patreon for as little as $5 a month. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank my patrons Matthew Andronowitz, David Phelps, Chris Lord, Andy Luke, Larry Bennett, James Vanderhaeg, T. Stoney, and L. Carton. Until next time, have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.